growing up, like my parents, my grandparents would be like, you don't rat on people. You don't do that. Like, that's not what you do. And I thought, man, they're teaching officers to be this way, to act this way. Like, I don't like that. And so when I got into the conventional army, I realized it wasn't anything like West Point. It was very much like you're on a sports team again. You got the locker room, and there's a way that you can interact socially with people, and like you want to talk about this emotional intelligence, having a social awareness and being socially intelligent. And I thrived, man.
Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you. This episode is sponsored by Classical Conversations. Since 1997, Classical Conversations has been equipping families like yours with the resources to homeschool with confidence, following a classical curriculum rooted in a Christ-centered worldview alongside other families in a local community. Homeschooling is doable with Classical Conversations. Check out classicalconversations.com/Gibbons for more information. Again, that's classicalconversations.com/Gibbons, Gibbens.
Noble, hi.
Jason, it's
You
great to
got,
meet you, man.
you got me. It's great to meet you too.
Dude, man,
How's it
a
going?
legend.
A
It's going
legend,
great, bro.
Your beard is going great,
It's
man.
great
You look
to
good.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it, man. Bro,
Sure.
I'm a huge fan, dude. I've gone through your book twice, man. It's incredible.
That means a lot. Thank you. I
absolutely,
appreciate that.
man.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Very
of
cool.
course. Bro, I'm so excited, dude. Okay.
You're excited.
So,
It's getting me excited.
That's good, man. Man, I'm talking to the man. So awesome. All right, EQ Gangsters, what is going on? I'm here with a super guy, war hero. He's the bee's knees. He is the author of a book for my YouTube audience, author of a book called Deliberate Discomfort. Oh, I've got the blur on so you guys can't see it. But anyway, Deliberate Discomfort. And he is the CEO of Mission 60. Phenomenal organization. Think Special Forces version of Echelon Front, Big Jocko Willink. He's got the SF crew and some amazing leaders that he's been working with to create an amazing company. And I'm honored, Jason, that you would take some time with me today to share with my audience some of your leadership insights and wisdom, brother. Thanks for being here.
Oh, most definitely, Noble. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate that intro. I'm no hero. The real heroes are the people that put up with me. So I'm happy to be here, man.
West Point. How
Yeah.
and why did you want to pursue West Point?
I never wanted to. They pursued me, So I grew up in the Virginia area, and I played sports, and I was really good at football and lacrosse in particular. And I got recruited to play in a number of colleges my junior year in football, and they were big colleges. Florida State was big, national champion and everything, and I was excited, man. I thought I was going big time. Then the recruiters came to my high school, and they're like, "Oh man, you're just over 6 foot. You're, 185 pounds, and you're a linebacker, man. Like, you can't play with us, So I started getting recruited by some of the smaller schools, West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force, and Division I AA schools and things like that. My parents were super excited about West Point, and the recruiter was super aggressive. And eventually he came to my house for dinner one night, and he's like, "Jason, I need an answer. You got to let me know. You got to let me know right now. Either you're in and you'll come to West Point, or you're out and I got to go somewhere else." And so I decided to pull the trigger and say yes. And so that's how I ended up at West Point.
Okay, that's amazing, bro. It's awesome. So I was not recruited. I, by God's grace, slid under the radar somehow because they were, that's incredible, man. That's awesome. So
I was lucky, I guess. Well, I guess once I got there, I realized how unlucky I was, but getting there was pretty lucky.
What'd you major in?
So I started out in mechanical engineering, and then I went to I went on my mission, my religious mission for my church, to Russia. And then I came back. So it was a 2-year mission. I came back, very unique experience. And I continued along that mechanical engineering path. And I was like, man, this sucks. I'm not interested in this at all. I said, well, what am I good at? And I said, well, I just, for the last 2 years, became proficient, fluent in Russian. Let me major in Russian. So that's what I majored in. I majored in Russian.
Okay. Okay. That's great. So let's say from a leadership standpoint, Jason, and from an, let's say emotional intelligence piece, what was the hardest thing for you emotionally going through West Point?
Oh, what a great question. West Point was the toughest time of my life. So much so that whenever I went through hardships in the future, I would always think to myself, at least I'm not at West Point. And I think the reason why is because I came from a background and sort of an area where my parents, particularly my mother, she fed me a lot of positivity, and they put me in positions where I could succeed, and I had a support system. And a lot of the things that I took for granted when I got to West Point, I had to do, right? And so it was really the first time where people were, feeding me negativity and berating me and saying all these things to try to motivate me. And I understood that kind of going in, like if I performed poorly, they were going to get after me. Like I knew that just from playing sports and coaches getting after you and so forth. But I thought that if you performed well, then you wouldn't be yelled at. And that was the biggest eye-opening experience for me at West Point was even if you performed well, they would still yell at you and say that you suck. And that didn't, as a young kid, away from home for the first time, immature, naive to the world, being thrust into this environment where all these things are happening at once, and it's, you have very little time to process them and take time to sit back and think about it and let it sit in and so forth. Cause you're moving. I mean, every day at West Point, especially when you're a freshman, there's no time. Like you just have to move forward. And so I think that helped me in a sense that I feel like anything that comes my way, I can handle, and I just can move forward and it can just kind of hit me and hurt me and I can just keep going. So that's kind of where I was at, like learning emotional intelligence at West Point, becoming self-aware, realizing that I don't have all the answers. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the strongest. I'm not the fastest. I'm not all these things that I was, where it was essentially I could do no wrong growing up. And I never lost or never failed, or at least it seemed that way. Where at West Point, it's like everything, at least for me, everything seemed like I failed at everything, so it was a complete shift in mindset. And that's a hard shift to endure, at least it was for me. Some people love it. Some people, I remember going to alumni dinners where people like, best 4 years of my life. Not for me, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's fascinating answer there. And you're right. That's a great perspective. What year group were you?
I went there in 95. So I was originally 99. And then I graduated after my mission in 01.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Okay. So I'm 96 is my year group. And
Nice.
what's interesting is, that dynamic, which you kind of also reference in your book, I think, when you're talking about SF, your SF experience, that, everybody is a stud.
Yeah.
There's just varying degrees of, but everybody, like, and that's what for me, like at West Point, I'm like, it did fairly well in high school, in athletics, a decent, I wasn't like your level of athletics, but a decent amount athletics. And I just had a super hard work ethic, but not a brilliant guy by any stretch. And, going to West Point, like everybody was the captain. Everybody was the valedictorian. Just
Yeah.
being in an environment where you're surrounded by rock stars, it was a humbling experience. And then, like you expressed too, the amount of stimulus that you're getting, especially as a freshman, it's, it's definitely overwhelming.
Oh man,
And I'm sure
so
your SF
much.
experience, yeah, but like your SF experience, the guys you had in your book, I'm like, these guys are like, it's just superhuman. These stories that you shared, it's like, I put myself, okay, what would I have done if I was in the, it's like, I have no idea. Like, it's unbelievable the stories that you shared, man. And like, what was so transitioning from West Point into the military? Let's say your
Yeah.
conventional time. What was How did you grow as a leader during your conventional time, and then share maybe that transition to go to SF, and then I'll have more questions for your SF time.
Yeah, no, no, great question. So I had such a negative experience for 4 years at West Point. I hoped that my conventional experience, just graduating and becoming an officer for the first time, I hoped that it wouldn't be like that. And I said, if it's like this, then I'm out after 5 years. Like, this is not how I want to live my life. Like, I got other things to do, and so forth. And to my surprise, I was happily surprised that it wasn't anything like my West Point experience. So meaning, like, a lot of times at West Point, it feels like, at least it felt like to me, that you were driving down the road, everyone's driving their cars down the road. And, maybe you want to go a little bit faster than the speed limit. Maybe you're 1 or 2 miles over, maybe you're 5 miles over the speed limit. And then, in your mind, you're like, you're looking at around, you're like, I hope there's no cops out here to get me. I know I'm breaking the rules, but I need to get somewhere fast, or maybe I just want a little bit of freedom. At West Point, it felt like everybody driving on the road was a cop. And so people that weren't even cops would pull you over and give you a citizen's arrest or something. Like, that's how it felt like to me. Like, I remember one time I got back from my mission, and my sponsor would typically invite me over to their house on Sunday for a dinner or whatever. And I wore jeans, and a collared shirt tucked in with a belt. And I didn't realize you weren't supposed to wear jeans, so my roommate followed me and then wrote me up, and I got in trouble for wearing jeans, to go to my sponsor's house. And I just always remember that. I was like, what kind of person, like, who would do that? Like, growing up, like, my grandparents would be like, you don't rat on people. You don't do that. Like, that's not what you do. And I thought, man, they're teaching officers to be this way, to act this way. Like, I don't like that. And so when I got into the conventional army, I realized it wasn't anything like West Point. It was very much like you're on a sports team again. You got the locker room, and there's a way that you can interact socially with people, and, like, you want to talk about this emotional intelligence, having a social awareness and being socially intelligent. And I thrived, man. Like, my first unit, they loved me and I loved them. I was in Korea. So I went to Ranger School, and then I went to Korea, was first the 506 Alpha Company. And we were up near the DMZ, and had a team, and I loved that team, and we did great work together. We did a lot of training exercises, and we were like top of the battalion, sort of thing. And it was awesome. And my company commander, he gave me a glowing OER, and it was just awesome. I was like, man, they appreciate me. They like what I'm all about, like who I am, and the hard work that I put in, and so forth. And I immediately went to Iraq for the initial invasion. So I was attached to the 101st Airborne Division, 3187 Rakkasans, went and did that. Also had a great time, in combat, and being in part of that unit, that team, having guys like respect me and look up to me, and putting me in positions to perform, and then performing. So that's great. And then, and that kind of led me to trying out for SF. So the conventional experience for me was awesome. If I got out after 5 years, I would have looked back on my time with pride and looked back fondly. Like, that was awesome. That was a great time for me.
And what were one or two lessons that you learned as a leader, and maybe even about yourself, during your conventional time?
The biggest things that I learned during the conventional time were, number one, expectation management. And so it feels like people typically get angry because of unmet or unclear expectations. And so I always wanted to be very clear with everybody about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and what the end state was, and what success looked like, and what failure looked like. I also learned that if you could be, like, I call it supreme sang-froid, like, it's a French word meaning cold-bloodedness. So if you can just be kind of cold-blooded, just a cool cat, like don't get super emotional. Don't lose your temper. Don't fly off the handle. Even when things are chaotic, man, people responded to that. And when I saw them respond to that, I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it even more. And I wanted to be even better at it. And so when guys were in combat for the first time and there were some bullets flying, or there were some incoming mortars, or there was whatever, some of the guys would panic for a second and kind of look around. And I always wanted to look at me, and I always wanted to be cool, almost to the point like where I wanted to yawn. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like we're good. Like, here's what we'll do. You know what I mean? Like, and then, okay, Jason's okay with this. He's not freaking out. Therefore, I don't need to freak out. Okay, let's remember our jobs. You do this, you do that, and just be cool like that. So I thought that was always, that was a great lesson that I learned pretty early on. Almost, I'm not sure if that was something I stumbled into, but that's something that I learned that I thought was a great lesson to move forward in life.
That's huge. And that's a very applicable lesson in parenting. When your kid stubs her toe when she's 3 or 4, and first thing they do right is look at the parents. Okay, if the parents freaking out, kid immediately freaks out. If the parent stays calm and cool, oh, hey, let's see what's going on here. Right, the kid stays calm in my experience too. So that's excellent that leading soldiers in combat, it's a very similar dynamic. If the leader freaks out, the folks will freak out, right? So that's great. At what point in your journey, in fact, chapter 1 in your book, you mentioned, you met, well, actually in chapter 1 and chapter 2, I mean, throughout the book really, but you mentioned about the concept of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I did not start getting self-aware until 4 years ago. So I was emotionally clueless for 4 decades of my life. For most of my life, I was clueless. At what point, which is why now I have a business, right, where I'm do executive coaching in the area of emotional intelligence, because I know the impact and the consequences of being emotionally clueless. And now after 4 years of an emotional fitness program, I'm still working on it. So I haven't arrived by any stretch, but I'm still growing, but it's been life-changing for me. At what point in your life, Jason, as you have developed into this amazing leader, when did you start developing your self-awareness, and how?
Well, great question. I will give West Point credit for that, because I was very self-unaware kind of growing up until I was about 18 years old. And I think that's pretty common. I mean, for the most part, for people. And then when I got to West Point, I got slapped, with the other side, where it was, hey, you're not who you think you are, And then I said, well, who am I? You know what I mean? Like, am I this guy that screws up, that gets yelled at all the time? I'm like, I've never been that guy before. Am I that guy, or am I this other guy? Who do I want to be? Am I this guy who's a comedian because I'm a pretty funny guy, or am I a guy who demands respect? Like, who am I? And I think that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves at some point. And I think also your friends or the people you hang out with kind of can define that for you as well. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future, right? Sort of thing. So who am I hanging out with? Who are the people that I tend to gravitate towards, that I resonate with, and why do I resonate with them? And as I started to ask these questions, I started getting into the values, like what values do they have, or do I think they have? And then what values do I have? And I realized the experiences that I had growing up kind of led me to being a certain person. And that helped me become self-aware. Like, I'm a loyal person. I just am. You know what I mean? Like, my experiences in life, and maybe just kind of how whatever's inside of me when I was born kind of led me down that path. I'm a very determined person. Like, you give me a task, like I'm going to see it to the end. You're like, I'm going to try to win. It's hard for me to quit things, even when I probably should quit things. Like, I'll keep going, right? And that served me well in the special forces and Rangers and in combat and so forth. But and in life, sometimes that's not the best course of action. Resourceful. I'm a guy where you give me very little guidance, figure it out, get it done. Okay, I'll get it done. That's probably something I learned along the way, because it sort of disgusts me, it angers me when people are given a task and like, well, I couldn't do it. Why not? Well, I called this guy, he didn't answer. Well, was that it? That's the extent of your effort? Like, you called somebody, they didn't respond to you, like, and now you can't get it done. You know what I mean? Like, that angers me when people are like, well, that's my best effort. I sent an email, I didn't hear back. It's like, well, I didn't ask you to send an email. I asked you to get the job done. And so that's kind of who I am, like just being self-aware. And I think that also can change over time. Like things happen in life. Maybe you go to combat and you get PTSD. Well, you have to be aware of that. Like you can't just hide it or pretend that you're not going through that. Talk about it, be vulnerable with people. You become a dad, or you become a husband, you become a father. Like all those things kind of shape who you are so you can become. So I would urge you to become self-aware and take a moment, take a knee, face out, drink water, stop, look, listen, smell, and say, all right, what is going on? How am I different? What can I do to improve in this scenario? And so I've constantly changed throughout the years. And I think also is a huge component of being humble and vulnerable. I always find that when people are telling me stories about how much of a badass they are, like I check out, man. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I know you're not a badass. I know some badasses and you're not that guy, you know what I mean? Or whatever. But when a guy tells me who I think is a badass and is humble and vulnerable and talks about their failures and what challenges they're facing, man, I am locked in 100%. Like, I'm listening to you and like, I am digesting everything you're throwing at me. And so seeing things like that, I'm like, I want to be like that. I don't want to be a guy who's like, look how badass I am. Look how much I can bench press. Look how fast I can run. I don't care. And quite frankly, most people don't care. What they want to hear is, how can I relate to you? How is this interesting to me? How can this help me improve? Because ultimately, you're the hero of your own story. You know what I mean? And if I can be the Obi-Wan to your Luke Skywalker, then I'll be happy to do that all day long.
That's awesome. So being a tier one guy, having just an incredible military career, and now CEO of a very, very successful company, successful author, like you are just a consistent track record of amazing
You're far too kind.
performance. No, well, I mean, it's no, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your nose. Like it's facts, right? So how have you, so not only your own success, but also who you spend time with, who you hang out with is, I know you hang out with, I mean, just the folks in your book, it's amazing. How have you developed your humility?
That's a good question too. You've got great questions. How have I developed my humility as I've grown and through the lenses of who I spend time with, who I hang out with? From a professional standpoint, starting a business is very difficult. And if you've never done it before, you're going to trip and fall, and you're going to have to pick yourself back up many, many times. Most people are going to bring on people that they know, friends, to be partners. And sometimes you get into a disagreement with your friends and you lose friends because of the decisions you make as a business owner. And that's been very difficult for me. I'm a team guy, always have been a team guy. I want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to win. I want everyone to succeed. And I still see all the people on my team in Mission 60. And when people get angry or leave, that really affects me. It's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow. And so I look at myself and say, what did I do? What can I do to improve? How can I mend this relationship? How can I be better? One thing that's really helped me is mindfulness, and my buddy, John McCaskill, you should definitely have him on the show. He's a Navy SEAL guy. Unfortunately, he's a Naval Academy guy as well, but he's a mindfulness expert, man. And he told me about it. And I was like, this is a bunch of garbage, bro. He's like, no, man, I'm telling you, it works. I said, well, show me. And he did. And I got, no, but I'll tell you, man, it worked. It works. So breathing really helps me to kind of see things in a different perspective and to calm myself and not be a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, cause it's easy when you're in the military to talk to people a certain way. Personally, I try to, this is good advice for all husbands out there. I try to listen to my wife and do what she wants as much as I'm able. And she tells me things like she wants me to talk to her differently, so it's hard to transition from military, also business, kind of demanding, directing, short orders, to, being a lot softer in what you need and how you communicate. Instead of asking me, like my wife would say, instead of telling me like, hey, can you grab that for me? Say, hey, would you mind, please? So there's a lot of fluff that goes along with it, but that's how she responds. The next is how other people respond to that. For example, my son, he's 4 years old. He's a sweetheart, man. He's the nicest kid in the world. But every time he falls or scratches himself or anything, even if it's like the tiniest thing, like he bumps his elbow on the wall, he wants a Band-Aid, and I'll get him a Band-Aid, right? And I'll put it on and I'm like, all right, Jack, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst pain you can imagine, how bad does it hurt right now? And he'll be like, it's 11, daddy, or whatever. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, you don't know what pain is, right? Like not, this is not on the level of 11, so here's your Band-Aid. And as soon as you put that Band-Aid on, it's like, you feel better? Yeah. And it's like, okay. So it's psychological. And so, it goes against my nature to be that soft and to be that understanding and caring and so forth. But it comes back to, I guess, something you're an expert in. It's empathy. Like, put yourself in their shoes and try to understand where they're coming from and give them what they're asking for. Because growing up, being a religious guy, you kind of live your life by the golden rule in a lot of ways. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But I think a better approach that I've learned in life is that platinum rule: is do unto others as they would have it done unto them. So instead of saying, all right, I'm going to give you this gift for Christmas because I would want this, say, what do you want for Christmas? And kind of give them essentially that, so that's how I've grown, by being positively intrusive and ask questions of people, find out what they need, customize the response, the solution to them, and give it to them.
Love that, Jason. Love that. What one of the benefits of my 4 decades of people pleasing addiction has been developing an incredible amount of curiosity about people.
Yeah.
And so I love that perspective, the platinum rule, that you shared there. And now, thankfully, 4 years into my healing journey from emotional growth standpoint, emotional intelligence standpoint. So now I can love people and be curious about people, not from a place of emotional neediness, but because I genuinely care and love people, not because I need something back from them. You know what I mean? So it was kind of a side benefit of my addiction is that the empathetic leadership and just being curious. That's great, man. I love that. And then you said like the positively intrusive. Was that what you said there?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when people, let's say you and I are having a conversation and someone comes up and just interjects, and you and I we're vibing, man. We're on the same frequency. We're having a great conversation, and this person sort of just throws us off. And then, we talk to this person for a while, and then they leave, and we're back to, and we're like, oh man, that sucked, man. We were having a great conversation. But there's a way, and it's a skill that you need to master, where you can be intrusive, but you can be intrusive in a very positive way. It's a kind of way that you ask questions, the way that you your body language, the way that you communicate with people, the way that you understand people, that social intelligence and so forth. And I think it's very hard to do, but if you can master it, it'll take you far in life.
Yeah, excellent. Totally agree. It's been fascinating. I've been coaching folks or leaders for a long time, and now in the EQ space the past 4 years, it has been fascinating how many leaders lack the self and social awareness, like you shared there. What has been some of your experiences now with, so you've been the CEO of Mission 60 now for how long have you
Oh gosh, bro. I think we're at 12 years now.
Wow. That's incredible. What are some things that you have learned about leaders as the CEO of a very, very successful leadership consulting company, speaking, all the stuff that you guys do? What have you learned about leaders from all your years of leadership?
Yeah. Man, so many good questions. So I'll say a couple of things. One is, what works for one person or one group of people will not work for somebody else. I remember I have this I'm a storyteller. And so I like to tell stories. And I like to tell jokes from time to time as well. And that's how I connect with people. And I had this great story about the Stanley Cup. And so the short of it is during the Q course and the third phase is the alpha course. So you're a lot of classroom type stuff. And two of the captains in my group told me that the game 7 of the Stanley Cup was going on in Raleigh that night, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Edmonton Oilers. So on a whim, we went up there. We didn't have any tickets, found a way to get in, found a way to get on the ice at the end of the game with the players, hoisted the Stanley Cup, went to the after party, hung out with all these celebrities. We basically snuck in everywhere, man. It was awesome. And I got all these pictures. And the next day, during the Q course, I had a big op order that I had to brief. I was being graded on. And the general that we were briefing, he just stops and he's like, just stop. Just tell me the story about the Stanley Cup. And we did. And I had a slideshow presentation with me holding the cup and all this stuff. It was awesome. And so people seemed to like that story a lot, you know. And when I got to my team at 10th group, I told them that story. And just like I always did, you know, I was excited and was making it funny and, you know, self-deprecating the whole thing. And I just got blank stare response, just like seriously, sir? Like, and I was like, man, like that story kills it. It didn't kill it with my team for whatever reason. So I'm saying that because you have to adjust your leadership, your personality to the needs of the team, you know, to how they interact and to how they operate and so forth. You don't need to completely change who you are at all. I'm just saying, just tweak some things and figure out what they need and give it to them. All right. So that's one thing I'll tell you. And don't be discouraged either. You know, if you come from one organization where you were killing it, you go to another, you try the same stuff and it just doesn't work. Okay. Recognize that it doesn't work and figure out what does work and go from there. It's not that difficult and it's discouraging for sure, but it'll help you grow and be better as a leader. The next thing is no matter what people tell you, they're always going to do what they want to do. And so as a leader, I always try to figure out pretty quickly what people want to do. And then I ask myself, does that add value to me in any way? Okay, if it does, then I'm going to hire you to do that. And here's your salary, you know? And they are happy because they're doing what they wanted to do and they're getting paid to do it. And I'm getting some benefit in return. I would hire people in the past for my nonprofit, Warrior Rising, and say, all right, I need fundraisers. I need people to raise money. And people would say, yeah, I can raise money. Okay, well, tell me your plan. And they would say, well, I'm going to raise X amount of dollars. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm like, that's awesome. Do it. And 5 months down the road, you know, when we do an evaluation, it's like, well, how much have you raised? You raised zero. Like, what have you been doing this whole time? Well, you know, I've like I said, I've sent them emails, I've called these people, I'm working this, I'm working that, and hopefully this, hopefully that. It's like, listen, you're not good at this and you don't like doing this because I see you doing all these other things. We need to get you into a position where you're happy and you're doing something that you're good at, you know, and where you're getting results, because this ain't it. And so that's been difficult. If somebody says they can do something, instead of hiring them to do it, I say, prove it to me. Oh, you're a master at Excel spreadsheets? Okay, show me. Well, actually, okay, I got the will. Actually, you don't know what you're doing. You just put it on your resume. Maybe you took a course, but you're not really good at it. Okay, got it. You want to raise some money for me? Okay, I'm going to give you 2 weeks to raise $5,000. If you do, you're hired. What do you mean? Well, if you don't believe in yourself enough to do that, how are you going to convince me to believe in you? You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to push back on that, that's a red flag for you. Like, nah, like you're not a good fit for this organization. Prove to me you can do what you say you can do, and we can bring you on. So those two things is putting people in a position where they can do things that they want to do, and then having them prove that they can do things to you before you hire them. Those are two things that I've learned as a business leader.
That's excellent. That's excellent. It's, you know, again, I think it was your first chapter when Brian Pettit had said, he'd ask you, hey, what's one of your lessons you learned from West Point or as a lieutenant or whatever? And you're like, hey, trust your NCOs. And he's like, no. And you're like,
No.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, trust, but verify. And, so that's an excellent point. And as a 25-year entrepreneur myself, dude, totally. Yes. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Okay. What has been one of your most enjoyable clients to work with and why? What has been one of your most challenging clients and why? And you don't need to do names, obviously, but like type or what made them the most enjoyable, what made them the most challenging?
No, I'll happily name names. And I don't think anybody would be offended at this. Hope they aren't. So the first client we ever had was the New York Jets, the NFL's New York Jets. That was the most fun I've ever had in business. We got an opportunity to pitch to them. And I was told before we even went that we were not going to get the contract. It was essentially a favor, chance for us to learn, to get a pitch under our belts. It was our first ever pitch. And Matt and Shane were with me, two of my buddies in the special forces, and they were sort of original founders with me of Mission 60. And I convinced them to go all out. And so I said, hey, we're going to do this pitch, but we're going to do a hostage takedown scenario where you guys are going to come in as terrorists dressed as role players with AK-47s, not real AK-47s, flashbangs, not real flashbangs, zip ties, hoods, and all that. And they did not want to do it. They're like, dude, this is stupid. Like, we're not going to do this. And I got excited about it. I'm like, we got nothing to lose, man. We were already told we're not going to get this contract. Let's just go all out, man. Let's take a risk. Let's see if we can do it. And so, long story, we got to the facility late. We got a flat tire. It was a pouring rain outside. It was like a monsoon. We showed up like with 2 minutes before the presentation, just sopping wet. And Shane and Matt are like, are we going to do this? I'm like, let's do it. And so I went in there and I started the presentation, and the lights go off, flashbangs go in there. Matt and Shane come in there shouting, screaming, throwing all the coaches on the floor. And we threw Rex Ryan on the floor and put a bag over his head, zip tied him. And then the lights went on and everything. It was hilarious, right? And then we lifted the bag off of Rex's head, and it could have gone one of two ways. One, get the hell out of here, and at which point we would have got out of there and we would have had a great story to tell. People are like, I can't believe you guys thought that would work. Like, okay, well, it's a hilarious story. The second is he could say this was awesome. And so he lifted the bag off the head, and old Rex, man, he was like, that was awesome, man. Like, tell me about that. Like, that's crazy. And so we just crushed the rest of the presentation. And at one point I was so excited. I was, towards the end of it, I was right in front of Rex's face. And I was like knife edging him in his face, and Shane and Matt were like, Jason, just stop, man, stop. I was excited, and so we finished. And Rex was like, hey, man, I know this is a brand new organization. This is your first time pitching. And I know that Dave told you that you wouldn't get this contract, but guess what? Your first ever client is going to be the New York Jets. And so that was awesome. And that was, we had a season-long contract with those guys. We had no idea what we were doing. We were making everything up as we went. And we had access to everything, to the facility, to the players, to the coaches. We went to Woody Johnson's farm. We met all of his guys. And it was just so fun for the first time, experiencing all that, finding success right out of the gate. And so that was my most memorable client, my most fun client. And they had a great team. That Tim Tebow and Darrelle Revis in his prime, and Mark Sanchez in his prime, and Antonio Cromartie, and all these all pros, for the team, which was cool. My least favorite client was the Oakland Raiders. That was a tough deal because the head coach, Dennis Allen, he's now the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. He hired me, and he's like, Jason, I'm in a tough spot. I have to win this year or I'm fired. I know this, because he had the self-awareness. I brought in all these guys all these new guys because we had money to pay for them, salary cap money. And I don't know who these guys are. I don't know if they're here for the right reasons. I don't know if they're going to be here for me in the fourth quarter. I don't know if they're going to step up if we're on a 2-game losing streak, or if they're just going to call it, pack it in. I want you to help me identify the leaders on the team and tell me who are the guys on the team that I can trust. I'm like, okay. And still being pretty young in business and so forth, and just bold. I guess I'm just a bold guy. I started just walking around their facility, and I just started walking. So they have a football operations side and a business operations side. And I started walking over to the business operations side. And next thing you know, I'm in the offices of the president, the CEO, and the vice president, the CFO, and all these guys, and we're sitting around just talking. Like I'm befriending them. I'm doing the Green Beret thing. You know what I mean? I'm building rapport. And then they're telling me, like, F Dennis Allen, I hate that guy. I can't wait for him to fail so we can fire his ass. Like they're just telling me all this stuff. And let me tell you a story about this golf event. He no-showed and he embarrassed me, and like all this stuff they're telling me. And I'm like, oh man, who am I? Who do I work for? And am I responsible for telling Dennis all this stuff? Like he's the one who's paying me. He's the one who hired me. Do I betray this trust? Like, what do I do? And so I just kept digging more and more. And I just found out it was just a corrupt organization that that didn't support the coach. There were two factions, the business side, the football side, that hated each other. They didn't talk, they didn't get along. And it was it was in the air. Like you walked into that building, you could set, like it was dread. Like people did not want to be there. It was just an ominous, evil feeling, just like walking in that building. And it's like, well, no wonder this team is consistently losing when you have an atmosphere like this that you walk into every day. And so I worked with them for a year, and that was just a tough contract, a tough client to work with, because it was kind of like you took one step forward and then you took two steps back, or somebody forced you to take two steps back. It was a rough one. So anyway, long story, but those are the best client, the worst client I've had.
Yeah. That's no joke. That is no joke. And it was fun reading, you shared your New York Jets, some of that story in your book there, which was super cool to kind of read. Okay. Final. So two questions. One, any final tips, suggestions for leaders to grow and develop? Any final tips? And then last question will be, how can we follow you, connect with you, get your book, that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. Well, it's been fast, man. This whole conversation's gone really, really quick. So I hope you had fun and your listeners got some value out of it and so forth. I would leave everybody with this. So the last thing I'll say is everything that you do starts with trust. Like that's the beginning and the end. Chapter 1 in Deliberate Discomfort is all about trust. That's the focus of the chapter. And like you alluded to earlier, who do you trust? And in the military, when you're a brand new lieutenant, second lieutenant, and you don't know anything about leading troops in combat or that life, like you hopefully you would ask questions of people that have done it before. Like, how do you do it? What are some keys to success? And no, as you know, at West Point, everybody's going to tell you, as a brand new lieutenant, like a knee-jerk reaction, trust your NCOs, your non-commissioned officers. And so I did that my entire early career, trusted them. And it wasn't until, my company commander asked me, well, how's that worked out for you, Jason? And I looked back and I was like, well, it hasn't worked out that great. And I think that's the same answer that anybody would give you. Like, there's some guys that you trusted that did well, and some guys you trusted that stabbed you in the back or betrayed you or, didn't do well in whatever capacity. And he told me, like, yeah, I don't want you to trust your NCOs. And I'm like, what? Like, excuse me? Like, can you repeat that? Because I've never heard that before. He's like, I want you to get to know them as people and find out if you can trust them as people. Like, I want you to trust those individuals, not someone just because they have a sergeant in front of their name or a couple of chevrons and rockers on their uniform. Because here's the deal. I learned that there are guys in combat that I'd want beside me, that had my back, that would cover me, like 100 times out of 100 that were NCOs. Like, I want this guy. My life is in this dude's hands. Awesome. That same dude, when we went back to Garrison, I could not trust him to not get drunk on the weekend. I could not trust him to not get a DUI. I could not trust him to not beat his wife. So trust it's different in different areas. Same guy in combat that I could not trust in a firefight is a guy who would be like, hey, stay back with the gear or stay in the truck or whatever. that same guy I could have in Garrison, and he could just crush it on my sensitive items inventory, or I could totally trust him with the books and he'd crush it. He'd be awesome. So you got to learn that people respond differently, and you can trust them in certain ways, and you can't trust them in others. And you can't just blindly follow somebody. Just like if you went to the doctors and you said, "Hey doc, what's the prognosis?" "Oh, you have stage 4 cancer." You're like, "Oh, damn. Okay, well, guess that's it for me." Why don't you go get a second opinion? You know what I mean? Like, maybe this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So trust, it all begins and ends with trust. And so you got to trust but verify, and you got to know individuals personally, so you can customize your trust to them. And then finally, I'll leave you with this, your final question. How can you follow me? So Jason at mission60.com or Jason at warriorrising.org. That's my email address. You can go to warriorrising.org or mission60.com, find out more about us. You can also go to deliberatenesscomfort.com. You can buy Deliberate Discomfort on Amazon. It's probably the best way to buy it. I think it's like $18. Please leave a review, only if it's positive. If no, you can leave whatever you want. I'm happy to receive any type of feedback, right? I'm writing book number 2 right now. I'm pretty excited about it. And it's about me going to combat. So book 1, Deliberate Discomfort, is about choosing hard things. It's about me as a young leader, young SF commander, learning what I need to do in garrison. And now I'm deployed. And how has leadership changed? Now that I've chosen discomfort, how do I maintain that resolve to the end? How do I endure? How do I complete the mission? How do I lead in chaos? And so that's what book 2 is about. I'm writing it right now. I'm excited about it. Hopefully we can get that out by the end of the year. And you can follow me on LinkedIn too. Jason Van Camp at LinkedIn. I've got like 32,000 followers. Not a humble brag, just been working to get that up. I know some people have hundreds of thousands, so it's all relative, I suppose. But if you want to follow me on that, that'd be great. And that's all I got, Noble. So thanks, man.
Jason, absolutely, dude. Just stoked, bro. Humbled again that you'd spent time, and thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom, dude, and the journey that you have been on personally and professionally to get where you're at today, man. I'm excited to continue to follow you and would love to stay in touch.
Hell yeah. Count on it.